Yes, and peace and love, wonderful family. I hope that everyone is doing fantastic on another wonderful day, being on the 10th day, on the 30th of the month of October, the year 2022. Also, the year is moving pretty fast. I do not know what you have been up to for the 9 months, but we are in the 10th month, and everything I do hope is looking out good, is looking well for you. If not, eventually things will still shape up. In the 254, it's actually 27 degrees Celsius, and it seems like it might be raining a little bit later on. But we are always appreciative of the rainfall. This is a Kenyan podcast, your number one weekly trending and topical issues podcast in the 254. And we are looking forward to having an enjoyable as well as an entertaining show as we get to discuss different issues on what is happening in the 254. First and foremost, if you are worried about foreign currency, the availability of dollars, that has been an issue that had been raised a little bit earlier on from a conversation that was being had during an interview by the one and only Riggy G, who is also Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. And talking about Riggy G, it seems like he is now adapting the name Riggy G, which has been trending on social media, which is really a little bit less easier to pronounce compared to Rigathi Gachagua. When you're talking about Rigathi Gachagua, not everyone will be able to just remember it. But Riggy G, it's really easy. It sounds almost close to Biggie G. Anyhow, I do hope that you're loving using that particular one. But for me, I have seen him being on so many on being quoted on so many different matters. Some of them they are actually issues that we have talked about on previous podcast. For example, which has to do with the cost of living, the high cost of living in the 254. Rigathi Gachagua has come up and said that people ought to first and foremost maybe perhaps even consider going back to the shamba system, which involve people going and farming in forest, and then after they have taken their crop or their harvest, they leave. The problem with that is that might lead to people being greedy, and I do believe it did not actually work out very well during Moi's era. But regarding Gachagua, Riggy G has been saying that people ought to go back and use the shamba system. I would say maybe perhaps there are merits or there are demerits that should be, some research should be done before people are allowed to go back into the forest, because there might be deforestation. People cutting down trees for the sake of getting to plant. And when they plant, they still want and more space, which is a bit problematic. But anyhow, I do believe that regarding Gachagua, maybe perhaps he was talking about it in terms of maybe helping the people, and we do know that food security is an issue in Kenya, not just in Kenya, but the rest of the continent of Africa. We do have issues with food security. But nonetheless, what I do know of is that we also do have other problems when it comes to foreign currency. And that was an interview yesterday with a citizen from a citizen aired on a citizen TV with the deputy president as well, talking about deep state and state capture once again. If you remember correctly, during the debate, the presidential debate, we actually did not have the debate with as we had expected, with the incoming president, Mr. William, Honorable His Excellency William Ruto. But there was a debate between Rigathi Gachagua and Martha Karua. And you remember, if you did watch that particular debate, as many people did, you will remember that Riggy G was talking about state capture. And now he has also said, because of state capture, it has also led, and the interest of these people that are the deep state, as he had called it, their interest, in running local banks, for example, the CBA, which is said to, be owned by the former Faster family, Uhuru Kenyatta as a family. That is why we do have interference with the foreign currency that is needed, and they have been operating banks in their own interest, not really in the interest of the country. But the CBK governor has also come out and said that they are not really responsible, for the mess that is right now, the shortage of a currency. And Riggy was saying that they are not able to request or to buy, the oil, because they do not have enough foreign currency. which is a bit problematic. But anyhow, what I do hope for is that we get our economics right, because if the nation continues in the same trajectory as we did have with the former government of Uhuru Kenyatta, where we did have foreign borrowing, and this was done in a way which was really not sustainable. So you would find more and more money being borrowed. Of course, there are the goods of the benefits of having these borrowing, but you also happen to realize that there are also other challenges. For example, the repayment of these loans, most of them did come from China, and when it's time to pay, you realize that it's difficult because the money has not even been used for the rightful purpose for which it was borrowed. Nonetheless, this is a Kenyan podcast. In case you are joining us for the very first time, let us know what you feel about the current crunch, or the shortage of foreign currency. Dollars hazipatikani. That is a problem. Dollars are really hard to come by. And even when it comes to purchasing, the oil that is also being needed in petroleum products, it has to be purchased through the dollars. And therefore, if you don't have enough dollars, then it becomes a problem. We might end up becoming the next Sri Lanka. If you have been following international news closely, you would realize that Sri Lanka also, it lapsed. But there has been a promise by the IMF to offer some assistance, I believe, to some of the countries that are facing, tough or dire situations, economically speaking. And Kenya might be one of those countries. I know Zambia is. I know other countries such as Sri Lanka, like I mentioned, is. I know Haiti is. And if we do not get our economics right as a country, then things are going to become even much more difficult. And I remember you can always stream us on the Kenyan podcast using our different platforms. We are on Spotify. You can find us there. We are also on Google Podcast. You can find us there, on Apple Podcast as well, and also on AudioMark. You can find us there and show us some love. Let us know how things are going on your end, and also let us know what matters would you love addressed on the Kenyan podcast. As always, we like to appreciate everyone that has been supporting the Kenyan podcast, and that is through our Twitter page. We do have Kenyan podcast on Twitter. And I appreciate all the love and the support and the engagement on Twitter. We are also on Instagram, Kenyan Podcast. If you haven't followed us on Instagram, please do. Recently, we also set up on TikTok. So please also engage with us on TikTok. Apart from that, we are also on Facebook. Did I mention Facebook? Yes, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and recently on TikTok as well. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please make sure you do. When it comes to now, going back to Riggy, once again, it seems like people are really just looking out to hear what Riggy says. The problem is, with being given these kind of attention, for example, on Twitter, you'll find on Twitter streets Riggy trending a whole lot of times. People now tend to become an airhead, and therefore he might now end up becoming, because all the spotlight is on him, he might end up now, saying all sorts of things just to make the sound bites and to stay relevant, but which is difficult to keep up with. Kenyans will find a way eventually of crucifying Riggy. But anyhow, going back into the matters of the day, I want to talk about the cost of living. Like I did say, things are not looking any good. There have been so many promises that have been given by the newly elect, His Excellency William Ruto. For example, he was talking about biocotton, getting to allow the farming of a biocotton, which he said would improve or will create employment for people in agriculture when they get to farm biocotton. And biocotton, I'm yet to understand whether is that supposed to be the GMO cotton, because if it's the GMO cotton, then we are headed for a root shock. In Burkina Faso, some years back, they tried farming using these GMO or genetically modified cotton seeds from Monsanto, and that actually backfired on them big time. So when it comes to Kenyans now taking up promises like this from His Excellency, I do hope that there is also research and there is also enough consultation coming from the different or the relevant departments, for example, the Ministry of Agriculture, so that the farmers know what they are getting into, and they also do know that in as much as you might get more cotton, the quality becomes poor if you're talking about this GMO like was used in Burkina Faso. But anyhow, right now you find all sorts of all sorts of promises being made.
sort of just to popularize and just to have people thinking that some better change is coming. For me, I'm not that much optimistic, but I do hope at some point there will be a ray of hope shining somewhere, because we really need that. But talking about a ray of hope, Kenyans are always looking out to see whether there is something that can bring them together and just veer them off from the stress, because right now Murife has been trending, and Murife don't run. I think about 2 or 3 days, people were talking about Murife, and also the man, memes of the man being chased by a dog and running, and it's really crazy that Kenyans will always find something to bring them together. And apart from that, also something that just sort of is some form of an escapism. If you ask me, I believe it's some form of an escapism that people want to get to engage with, and sort of run away from the realities of the day, the harsh cost of living right now. But nonetheless, this has been the Kenyan podcast. And as always, like I did say, you can also drop us an email, kenyanpodcast at gmail.com. If not, you can also always find us on Twitter. That is, we are able to find you much faster on Twitter and also much faster on Instagram. But we shall be winding up on today's broadcast on YouTube. We hope that you get to engage with us on others. But my question was, do you think that Riggy, his claims regarding, or not really his claims, but his, his call for people to reconsider the Shamba system, do you believe that that is a solution for the food insecurity that we do have in our country? Because right now, if you look at the situation, not just in places like in the North Rift, go now look at northeastern Kenya, where the former leader of the majority, Aden Duale, represents or hails from. He has been making an appeal to the rest of the country for assistance or for help that will go to assisting people get food and survive during these harsh times. We know that there have been a prolonged period of no rains in the northeastern part, and there is therefore looming famine and also hunger, where people are caught up in the drought. And so he has called on, I believe, the rest of the country to help people out, both the private sector and the government, to go into helping the people of Moyale. Sometimes, when you do have these situations, and famine is not the very first time we're having a drought and famine in the northeastern part. The only problem is that the government does not do enough to mitigate these effects of the drought and famine in the northeastern part. For example, we do know that in around some times of the year, around different seasons of the year, we do have a lack of rainfall. But the problem is, when we do have a bit of rainfall, we do not have reservoirs collecting this water, or we do not have people maximizing on this water from the rainfall. We do have places flooding sometimes, and this water is not collected. Apart from that, I do believe maybe there should be boreholes as well, to make sure that people can get places that they can get to fetch the water from, and or get some water from to survive. Sometimes also, we also do find that livestock, which is the main economic or the source of livelihoods for the people of northeastern, a lot of livestock dying. When you do have these prolonged periods of drought in the northeastern. So sometimes the government does get to buy some of these livestock, but the prices, of course, are not so good. But of course, you would say you'd rather get a lower price for the livestock than it ought to be, than just overall losing the livestock. So there should be ways in which there should be special agencies, I do believe, and these agencies are supposed to be in preparation of these disasters, because this is a disaster, and there should be ways of making sure that there is the help coming to these particular families and communities in the northeastern part, so that we are not getting to a point where we are waiting till the last minute, and during the last minute, that is when people are now acting. We are more reactive than we should be. We should be proactive, but we find ourselves being more reactive than proactive. And when it comes to matters of our life, some lives might also be lost in the northeastern part. Unfortunate to say, but this is because we do not have enough preparedness and also enough structures and systems to make sure that these communities are actually safeguarded from these harsh effects. And apart from that, now we are also talking about the impacts of climate change, you know, And because of climate change, things are even bound to get even worse than they are right now. For example, if we did have long periods of without rainfall, they might even become more longer, and we might also now see the weather patterns becoming also extreme. For example, with the flooding and the rainfall, we have seen what has happened with Pakistan, but these might also now be felt also in Africa, where we are not contributing much to the greenhouses, but we are not also doing enough to mitigate the impacts of climate change. We are lagging behind and we are moving rather too slow, which is a problem for us as a people. But nonetheless, this call by Adan Duale, I do believe, should also be heeded to, because we want to save lives, in the northeastern part of the country. And the problem is, even next year, perhaps we might also hear the same predicament, in the same northeastern part. So I would say there should be systems put in place early in advance. Right now, we should be getting ready for next year and the next 2 years and then the next 3 years, not wait until when Adan Duale has to come out and say, oh, Kenyans, we need to stand with fellow Kenyans. Of course, it has to be, people have to stand with fellow Kenyans, but there is a need for people to be much more proactive in terms of what we do as a country to sort of mitigate the effects of climate change and also these harsh climatic conditions. I want to thank everyone for being with us on today's Kenyan podcast. As always, it's a delight to have you tuned in. And it's always a delight to also, get in your feedback on some of the matters that we get to talk about right here. In case you haven't followed us on Twitter, please make sure you do. It's Kenyan Podcast on Twitter. And in case you haven't found us on Spotify, please also find us on Spotify. For taking a time, we are always appreciative of your time. It doesn't matter whether you take in for like 10 minutes or you listen through the whole podcast. We truly value and appreciate your support in whatsoever manner. And we also hope that you can share the podcast with your friends. Tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. And I do hope at the end of the day, we can be able to build up our country. We are not just about entertainment. We are also about informing, educating, raising, creating awareness, and also getting to address pertinent issues facing us as a Kenyan people, not just in the 254, but even beyond. Globally, we might be talking about what's going on with Saudi Arabia and our young women who are going to look for work there. We might be talking about what's going on with the sports when our Kenyan teams, for example, rugby, is going on, for example, in the USA, or it might be the marathon and athletics championships. All these particular matters of life, we get to address them right here in the Kenyan podcast with the aim of really inspiring a spirit of unity and also patriotism, and beyond that, also collaborating and working together as a Kenyan people globally. It doesn't matter whether you are in the diaspora, it doesn't matter whether you are here in the 254 Canairo, or you are also actually in East Africa, wherever you might be at as a Kenyan. We are here to keep it 100 with you and also to add value to conversations that are happening in different social media spaces, and not just social media spaces, but even on the ground. That is what we do with the Kenyan podcast. My name is Pikes. You can always get a hold of us, like I said, on Twitter, on Facebook, and also on Instagram at the Kenyan Podcast. In case you have a specific question, you can also email us, kenyanpodcast@gmail.com, and we shall be glad to respond to you in a timely fashion. For those who have subscribed, thank you so much for subscribing. In case you haven't subscribed yet, please make sure you do. And you also turn on notifications, because we aspire to do the podcast with more consistency. We want to be more regular with everything and be much more consistent. Let me know how you feel about Riggy. He said that he will be paying. He will be paying. I understand there is a rumor that he will be paying, or not really paying, but appreciating the girl that came up with the name Riggy. This is a nickname that was given to him by one of the ladies on social media. Is a name Chelangat. I can't really remember the name, but there is a lady who gave her him this particular name. And I understand that she might be picking up a check, which is not a bad thing, because you have to appreciate people for their creativity and for helping, the brand. Even if Riggy is a brand, the brand also pops. So there might be a check running her way, coming her way. But nonetheless, we shall be keeping our eyes on this new government, because sometimes you hear things being said about the government and you're like, wait a minute, is that true? or wait a minute, did this happen not just even with the government, but even with the private sector? But we are here to make sure that we get you on spot, or we share with you what's happening with the rest of Kenya and the rest of our Kenyan people in the diaspora. It has been wonderful, like you said. Thank you so much for being with us. Until next time, kwaheri. Enjoy the rest of your day. It's a homeboy signing out. It's a Kenyan podcast. Ishakubalika. Imekubalika. Asante kwa kukubalia the Kenyan podcast. Till next time, peace and love to everyone that has tuned in. We appreciate you. We love you. And of course, feel free to engage with us on our Twitter. We follow you back ASAP. Kindly follow the Kenyan podcast. Till next time, peace and love. Kwaheri. Enjoy the rest of your day. Keep it the Kenyan podcast.